Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to this appropriation bill. And like colleagues before me, I want to extend my sympathies to former Senator Joachim Henry, a very close comrade of mine, and to his family for the loss. I want to extend my solidarity with the citizens of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and to express to them that they have the support of all the people of St. Lucia. I think the government has expressed its solidarity, and certainly from the St. Lucia Labour Party. I also extend sympathies to my constituents who would have lost families and friends over the last few weeks, especially as a result of the COVID crisis. Mr. Speaker, I also rise on this occasion with a sense of exhilaration that this is the last budget statement which will be presented by the member for Miku South. In some ways, he surprised me, as he seemed to have been reined in by his advisors not to go off on a frolic of his character, to present the most outlandish promises, and to say so with utmost conviction and confidence. But otherwise, he was true to form. The budget statement lacked inspiration. It was devoid of substance and bereft of empathy and sensitivity. I felt sorry for the speechwriters. But, Mr. Speaker, we must respond to what was presented. So let us do so section by section. I will no longer bother with section 1. My colleagues, and especially colleague from Library, the member for Library, who did a fantastic job in deconstructing all the arguments about growth and unemployment and debt. After today, I'm not sure anyone on the other side have any moral authority to speak about that narrative that they had been peddling for the last few years. So let us move on to section 2. And Mr. Speaker, I want to refer to pages 15 to 27. I cannot help but feel hopeless when I listen to the member for Miku South. I kept wondering which country he referred to. That surely the reality that he spoke of, that the country which is doing so well, and COVID is so well managed, and that there is no cry for support, cannot be the country that I live in, that we all live in. It cannot be. Every single day, I hear cries from families that are affected by COVID. Those who lost lives because of various reasons, but largely because of a decimated healthcare system that did not respond well to the COVID crisis. Let no one fool you. The deaths associated with COVID are not necessarily because of underlying conditions. Listening to the Prime Minister reminded me of the George Floyd trial which is ongoing. The defense is intent on proving that Floyd died because he took drugs, was a hypertensive, and had a heart condition. And each witness is asked by the prosecution, would Floyd have died on that day if it were not for the stranglehold of a racist white cop? And each time the answer is a resounding no, no, no. So I ask this Prime Minister, would the 64 deaths that occurred on this occasion, if it had not been for COVID? And the answer is no, no, no. Truth is, the UWP, this government, has been in power so far for 4 years and 10 months. 4 years and 10 months. Kenny Anthony's SLP had been in power for 4 years and 6 months. So this government has been in power longer than the SLP administration under Kenny Anthony. We heard in 2016, during the elections campaign, that Kenny had failed, and we needed to open OKEU now. Today we are still hearing OKEU is in transition. 4 years, 10 months later, St. Jude Hospital is still unopened, and there are desperate efforts to fix a ground floor of that edifice of corruption to house patients, to be able to boast that we finished St. Jude Hospital. All been done by a foreign entity, being paid $4.2 million to redefine the space to make it happen. 4 years, 10 months later. OKEU is struggling to have a single piece of equipment working. There is hardly any medication, and the staff is severely demoralized whilst government tries to force them to sign contracts and lose all their years of service. Meanwhile, the same foreign entity brought in to manage our hospital is being paid millions of dollars in consultancy fees, millions of dollars. Each day, I hear cries of people who are struggling for food, for medicines, to pay their bills, to take care of their children, and to just get by every single day. The figures show that government has only spent $7.2 million on income support. $7.2 million out of $500 million which were borrowed. They don't care about you, the people of St. Lucia. Did you get your fair share of the borrowing? And the Prime Minister, live on TV, when asked about the conditions of St. Lucians who are desperately in need of help to get by, to enjoy basic civilized conditions of living, says this is just SLP propaganda. Propaganda? The Prime Minister is delusional in giving the impression that there are no St. Lucians suffering and fighting to get by every day. Do the UWP MPs really believe that this is just SLP propaganda? They probably do, because not one has said to the PM, no, we do have people suffering and need help. You see, there are two St. Lucias. In the last 4 years, that distinction has been accentuated and reinforced. One St. Lucia, where some feast so much and others suffer so badly. Where the rich, the connected, the privileged can enjoy the spoils, and the poor, the marginalized, and the sufferers can be given the crumbs and called mendicants. And middle-class professionals are being pushed downwards and can barely make ends meet. So yes, they believe that stories of people crying out for help is just propaganda. It is for that same reason of greed, for some, that Castries South has been made to suffer. We have cried out for 5 years for roads, footpaths, for lights, for repairs to the Cicero playing field, for the completion of Bassett Joseph Community Center, for land ownership, for house repairs, and for basic support during COVID. We were denied over and over. We were told that we need to cry and cry again. We asked for simple programs like a STEP. We asked for Wi-Fi to be reinstated in Cicero, for the after-school program to be expanded to include activities like music, IT, and drama. We were told to cry and cry more. They did not care about us. They did not care about you. In the old cemetery, Fuasho, Banan, Monlatok, Cicero, Monkey Tongue, Goodlands, Ticolo, Bassett Joseph, Lacroix, and Marigot, they refused to provide any assistance. But election day is near, And guess what? They are back, smiling and rubbing their bellies. It is full. It is big. And yours are empty. You have suffered for 5 years. They first brought someone who, upon losing, disappeared. Disappeared. What happened to the promises that were made to you? Now, the same people who promised you that Mary Isaac would bring Siwo Epilet are now back with another promise. They first brought the mayor. They brought Timothy. They brought, who else they brought? They brought Buffalo. And now they bring Big Daddy. And you see the Prime Minister in Fuasho giving out contracts, I am told. All of a sudden. Because this time, they are willing to spend millions to win after trying to starve and victimize you for 5 years. They believe that you are hungry, weak, and vulnerable, that you will take anything that is offered to you. But they also want me badly. Why? Because I have stood up to them. I have stood up for you. I have stood up for St. Lucia. I have all my life fought against the notion of 2 St. Lucias. I know where I came from. I am from the bosom of Castries South. I was nurtured on the blocks and the communities and shaped by the circumstances of poverty and marginalization. I will never be a servant of the privileged, but rather a servant of justice and equity for all. So my voice has been loud in support of the poor and the victimized. I've been a vigorous critic of this government's bad policies and behavior. So I must pay. This battle is not about me and you, the people of Castries South. It is a higher battle fought by forces bigger than all of us. But we must play our part. We must engage in the political fights as they come. We will prevail. Have no fear. The writing is on the wall for all those who engages in iniquity. So let the battle begin. So money will flow. Millions of dollars, which is your money, taken from you, siphoned from you, denied to you. Take it. Take it. I want you to take it when it is given and then vote them out. I will never tell you don't take it. Although I'm told it is l'argent Roger. So just be a little careful when you take it. But Senator Fortuna Belrose said it clearly. Only 11 constituencies bought into the UWP philosophy, and the others must pay. They must be made to suffer. Nothing the Prime Minister said in the budget statement in an attempt to control the damage can change the reality of the last 5 years. They believe that you are too stupid, that you are too hungry and too desperate, that you will take the money and be happy, be so thankful. Let us prove them wrong. Let them know that you have pride. Take your money and vote them out. Point. So, Mr. Speaker, let's move on to Section 3. I want to refer to pages 31 to 39. The Prime Minister speaks of our salient lessons learned and that our nation is a resilient nation. Words, just words. Yes, we are a resilient nation. We have survived 4 years, 10 months of this wicked and vindictive government. Barely survived. The member speaks of loving you, loving your neighbor as yourself in public, but turns around victimizing people with impunity. I can give a list of professionals who have been victimized by this government, some for no reason at all, some simply because they supported and worked under the St. Lucia Labour Party. Who can forget the National Trust treatment for just fulfilling their mandate? Who can forget the treatment of Janine Compton, the daughter of the founder of the great party that the member from Castries South now leads? He said he was not approving her appointment because she criticized his party. Only autocratic leaders behave that way. And guess who fits that mold? I feel for the UWPs who for years fought hard for their party to now see it being used as the fabled cave in Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. I won't even begin to speak about my own situation with this government. That will be settled in time. On page 45, the member speaks of encouraging a culture of dependency. That in St. Lucia we have perpetuated the myth that the Maliwe will always be the Maliwe. Such nonsense, Mr. Speaker. Maliwe do not want to remain Maliwe, but they do demand that you give them a fair chance, that you give them a level playing field, that you provide equal opportunity so that they can achieve and not be called mendicants by members opposite. My mother did not believe that she must remain a Maliwe or that her children must remain Maliwe. It is why she fought so hard for her children to get an education and get a skill so that they won't be Maliwe. That is why they got PhD and master's degrees. Who told you that Maliwes want to remain Maliwes? Is asking for help to get by each day, for help for medication, help to bury loved ones and fix your plywood houses. Is that making mendicants of people? The PM told us in justifying the removal of the distress fund that poor people must insure their plywood houses. How disconnected from reality is he? I'm always pained to hear that when assistance is given to poor and marginalized people, that we are making mendicants of them and creating a culture of dependency. This is such privilege and elitist thinking. If not, why don't they complain about the companies that get concessions and incentives over and over and over again? Why are they not complaining? Is this not a culture of dependency among companies? Are we not making mendicants of these companies? But hey, this is a tale of two St. Lucias. The member speaks of shared sacrifices on page 37. Shared sacrifice? Are the FFF sacrificing anything? Tell me. This government has done everything to cement the economic and social separation of our country into two St. Lucias, and now speaks of shared sacrifice. I know Susie is suffering, Charlene is suffering, Alan is suffering, Matthias is suffering. But tell me, is Cabot suffering? Is Ojo Lab suffering? Is Theo Akin suffering? Are all the others suffering? The member speaks of leadership on page 33. Let me remind the member that he, the Prime Minister, as leader of this nation, was the one who referred to his critics, St. Lucians, as jackasses. That parliamentarians who demanded accountability and transparency were called backing dogs. The same member referred to 43% who never got a primary school education as a source of our problems. He compounded it by suggesting that it is single mothers in particular and that they should be criminalized for having children under 18 and with different men. Who blamed and stigmatized sections of the population during a COVID crisis when we needed true, sensitive leadership. Then, Mr. Speaker, the member speaks of beyond COVID-19, our accelerated journey to global excellence in section 4 from pages 41 to 76. Mr. Speaker, this budget cannot be taken seriously. I have searched and searched for any item, any initiative, any program, and any policy which is transformational. Nothing in the budget statement. I have looked for what is the big idea that will chart our way forward in a post-COVID world. Nothing. It now makes sense to me. This is a leader whose philosophical outlook on our journey is that our patrimony is measured by our credit rating. Do you know what that means? It means that we are nothing, no identity, no standing on the world stage, We have no contribution to the common heritage of mankind if not measured by our credit rating. Such nonsensical thinking, Mr. Speaker. You don't have to go far to cast aside that thinking. Look at Jamaica, a small state, but a giant on the world stage. What is Jamaica's credit rating? But should we expect differently? How can we, when we have been told that the ideological underpinning of this government is the belief that colonialism had a conscience? Do you know what that means, Mr. Speaker? It means that the suffering of our forefathers as slaves was right. It was done with love, with a conscience, with good intent. Why? Because it was in the pursuit of business and profit, even if it meant enslaving people, black people. This is the ideology that was espoused by the leader of the United Workers' Party. That, Mr. Speaker, speaks to their belief and how they see us. So, Mr. Speaker, forgive me if I have no faith in the budget statement. This member has repeatedly made statements, then in the same conversation denied that he even said them. I can present my top 10 tales. They would expose someone who would say anything at any time to make a point. The member can also cry on demand. And I heard a member opposite said that he has said to him to take a deep breath whenever he believes he's about to cry, or words to that effect. But can we take the budget seriously? Let us look at some of the highlights of the member for Miku South budget statements since 2017. And when I'm finished, you'll realize why you cannot take anything that the member says in his budget seriously. And I'm only going to look at one area, tourism and hospitality. So let's go to the budget of 2017-2018, delivered on May 9th, 2017. Number one, to begin work on the Fairmont St. Lucia Resort in Sabusha, Strozel, in September 2017. The hotel in Strozel, we were told in May, would start in September 2017. To this date, the hotel has not started. Ridgeway Beach will be redeveloped and will become the home of a luxury 5-star dual-branded hotel. Work on this property will begin within the last quarter of 2017. It has not started yet. Work to commence on the Honeymoon Bay Resort in Canals very soon. 4, the range development is expected to commence in the 4th quarter of 2017 or the 1st quarter of 2018, and the hotel is expected to be completed by the end of 2020. That's last year. It never started. Sandals Resort International has confirmed plans to add a 4th resort on St. Lucia. Groundbreaking for the project is set to begin in 2018. It did not start. 8 fishing villages will be transformed into unique tourism villages based on their attributes and strengths. That has never even started. Castries redevelopment. The port will be enhanced to accommodate larger cruise ships, and a marina will be built. That was told to us in 2017. Let's go on to the 2018-2019 budget, delivered on April the 3rd, 2018. Site studies and physical planning approvals are underway for El Pirata Viewport, known as Site C. This location will become home to a cruise ship home port terminal, duty-free retail, other retail and food and beverage establishments, hotel and casino, waterfront residences, marina, and free zone businesses. And it will start in 2018. We are in 2021. The workers are working, Mr. Speaker. But listen to this one. The promises of the 2019-2020 budget, delivered on April the 15th, 2019, 2019 is a very important year. 7 major hotel projects are expected to commence during this financial year. 7 hotel projects on April 15th, 2019. And it says, Honeymoon Beach in Canals. The hotel in Strozel has been taken over by a new investor and will no longer be a Fairmont-branded property. There have been minimal changes to the design and financing has been secured. And construction is expected to commence in the 4th quarter of this year. So that's 2019. The same hotel that was going to start in 2017 is now starting in 2019 with new owners. With the Sandals project, we are awaiting the outcome of a legal matter. And once this is resolved, the 360-suite project at a cost of US $200 million will get underway immediately. Never did. A 400-room hotel is earmarked for shock, with plans well underway. Work is about to start immediately. A 150-room courtyard Marriott at Point Seraphine will commence immediately. Still has not started. We will announce very shortly a major hotel golf in Cap Estate. I'll come back to that one. The development of the DSH project continues with our first race rescheduled to National Day this year. The horse racing track has been enhanced with 2 boutique hotels along with a polo and equestrian field. The second phase of the track is to include apartments, offices, and commercial space. Is due to commence later this year, 2019. So 7 hotels will start in 2019. 7. Do you know what is the greatest achievement of this government in 2019? No, there's no COVID yet. The economy contracted and there was negative growth. I want St. Lucians to understand that. This is the person who's running the economy, the country, as a business. This is the businessman prime minister. This is not the technocrat intellectual Kenny Anthony, or even the grassroots leader Stevenson King. This is the qualified CEO, guru, running the country as a business. And they were boasting and banging the desk that they are the best and they know how to run the country. And the economy contracted in 2019. Did you hear that, Mr. Speaker? Was that stated in the budget statement? Why were they keeping mum about it? They never told St. Lucians the economy contracted in 2019. They never did. Now you can understand why the ECCB had to take off its data from its website. They didn't want St. Lucians to know that under this United Workers' Party, the biggest boasters we have ever seen in government in this country, that the economy did contract after 7 hotels started in St. Lucia, or supposed to have started. But they are workers. They are working. They are the best. They were banging their hands on the desk. One even got a sprained wrist from banging his hand on the desk. And, Mr. Speaker, they never said that the economy contracted in 2019. It was never said in the budget statement. It was never said in a press release. It was never said on Newsmaker Live. It was never said on all the champagne and icy and juicy shows that they have. Never. Never, Mr. Speaker. But it happened because the Social and Economic Review had to carry it. But I'll tell you, oh, cemetery. They'll bury Big Daddy there when we finish beating him in the elections. But let me tell you, no, you'll get so much licks during the election. But let's go on. Let's go on. I don't look perturbed about this. When you have to bring a prime minister out in a community to give contracts to try to beat me, it tells you something, huh? It tells you something. But he wants me so badly. If I serve. Translate that for him for me, please. So, but I want you to hear 2020 promises. But listen to this. And this exposes the fraud that this government is. The political frauds that they are. Everything's about PR. In 2020, when COVID has already started affecting countries, when they themselves were saying how devastating COVID would be. On June 23rd, the Prime Minister says, some of these tourism developments are expected to begin construction sometime later this year. COVID had already started. Huh? There was a shutdown then. Remember, we got shut down in March. And he's speaking on June 23rd. Mr. Speaker, I admit that some of these projects have previously been announced in this honorable House and have not gotten underway. This has been due mainly to systemic tardiness or other factors. And he then names all the projects that would start for the last financial year. 1, Point Seraphine Business and Leisure Hotel, a courtyard Marriott. This hotel will be constructed on 41,000 square feet of land to the northwest of the existing duty-free shopping complex at Point Seraphine. 2, Pearl of the Caribbean. Listen to this one carefully. That's in June whilst COVID is going on, you know. And all members there are banging their hands because they are such workers. Let me tell you, you're the most wonderful workers in the world. You even work in, anyway. Following the successful completion of the thoroughbred racing track during the 2019-2020 fiscal year, the developers will focus on constructing a 250-room, 3- to 4-star hotel, catering to recreational and business tourists in Bourses Vieux-Fort during the financial year, whilst COVID is going on. Canals Resort, and it gives a whole long description of Canals Resort. Cabot Links, work has begun on site for the development of the golf course, with work on the hotel expected to commence this year. That's 2020. 5, and that's the one I really love, because I really want my friend, the member for Strozel, Saltibus, to invite me. Restaurant in Strozel, construction of the Soleil Couché restaurant in Delcey, Strozel is scheduled to begin this year. So I trust it has started, it will be finished, and when Pauline Antoine wins, I will take him to dinner in that restaurant. As the sub, the plans include the construction of 2 hotels and residences during COVID in 2020. Now, Mr. Speaker, it tells you what this government is all about. They will say anything. You saw the amount of sketches and renderings they showed over the last few days. The amount of sketches and renderings they showed over the last few days. Mr. Speaker, you really wonder if this is not a pantomime. It's a play that's going on, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, I admit that all governments boast of plans ahead of time and even make projections that have never been realized on time. As a member for Castries North and for Vieux-Fort South, they were prime ministers. But the member for Micoud South has made it into a science. It is all about flashing mirrors and promises that are designed to vaguely, to fool you. So after volley you, they have vaguely you, Mr. Speaker. So, having heard the member for Micoud South budget statement, I think you all agree we have to look for inspiration elsewhere. I can go on and on, Mr. Speaker, and show you that this budget is a total disappointment. There is nothing in the budget. St. Lucians are looking for a post-COVID recovery budget, something that will lift their spirits, and they will feel deep inside that this government cares about them and that there is a pathway that will take St. Lucia forward, Mr. Speaker. I cannot understand, and one of the members opposite was commenting on how it is that the Labour Party can say they care about people. What did they do? And I asked that member to go in the estimates. There is no money in the estimates for the school feeding program for this financial year. There is no money in the estimates for the school feeding program for this year. There is no money in the estimates for the after-school community program. None. How can you not have provisions for this? The National Sports Academy that the member for Grosley boasted about. Remember, there is not 1 cent included there for the National Sports. Academy, Mr. Speaker. Not a 1 cent. Not 1 cent. This government does not care about the people, Mr. Speaker. They do not care, Mr. Speaker. You see, the St. Lucia Labour Party, with all the faults they might want to say about the St. Lucia Labour Party, our record cannot be disputed. We always put people first. In fact, we put people first so much, they say that all we want to do is make people depend on us. In this chamber, members opposite said that if we had gotten all the money that they've gotten, what would you all have done if you all would have given it to people to support them? Listen to that. If we, the Labour Party, had gotten the money, what we would have done with it is to give it to people to support them. As if supporting people through a crisis is a bad thing. It is empathy. And let me tell you, head argument. When we take those monies and we build roads and other projects, we are creating employment, and it's a better way to do it. You spend $20 million on a road. $2 million goes into salaries. Another $5 million goes into materials. And where does the rest go? Markup, profit. And you're telling me, well, my numbers are not exact, Mr. Speaker, but I'm presenting a model to you to show you that a substantial part of those contracts do not go to the people, do not go to the workers. Do not go to the workers. Ask any worker on those projects how much he's been paid a day. And if you think there's any doubt about it, at the last sitting during the estimate debates, I made mention of the loan to the finance facility with Fresh Start. And it was mentioned by my colleague from Library this morning. Interest payments are already being paid on a project for a full $50 million, when $50 million has not even been expensed as yet. And nobody knows the actual cost of the project. But we will know one day, because elections is coming, and we will tell the people of St. Lucia what the exact figures are. You see, Mr. Speaker, after 4 years and 10 months of this government, it's about establishing a government that cares. We must learn to care for the people that we serve by putting them first. You see, we are told in sociology that the social contract between state and society is broken in societies like ours. And it's not the fault of this government or our government. It's a historical problem. Successive governments have tried in various ways to repair the disappointment of the people, because we promise a lot to the people, and we don't always deliver, and the people get disillusioned and disappointed in us politicians. You see, Mr. Speaker, you can see it happening. For 5 years, they made the people of Castries South suffer. Not even a step. But now they are paying them $200 a day to do step. $200 a day. $200 a day to cut grass, Mr. Speaker, on the eve of elections. $200 a day. But let me tell you, go down to Cicero now. They have 5 people. They have asked each of them to get 20 people to cut grass and to clean up in the bottom part of Cicero. And each of them getting $200 a day. $200 a day. I'm not going to mention the names of the 5 people. But they believe. Now, we've been begging for a STEP program because they are single mothers. There are people struggling that need some help during COVID. I have stood up in this house repeatedly begging for those people. They never agreed to give a STEP. But now they're willing to spend serious money in an attempt to win the seat. They're going to buy the seat. That's the plan, to buy the seat. But I tell you something, I keep telling the people, take the money, take it. Take it, take it, take it. Once they come and they offer you money, take it. Because for 4 years and 10 months, they refuse to give you anything. So all of them jump in for joy, you know, that things looking good. You know, BMW 7 Series, you know, by the slab, because they dishing out, they dishing out, they dishing out. So, Mr. Speaker, the St. Lucia Labour Party and the member for Castries East will meet the dreams and aspirations of the people. I know that. I know that a member of Castries East feels the people. He understands them. And it's why he has won 5 elections. It is why he has won 5 elections. And he has to be compared with the leadership we have now. A leadership that is characterized by one single motive: to serve the FFF first. That's their first motive. Our first motive is to serve the people, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the leadership of this government has been callous, insensitive, and devoid of any empathy for the struggles of most St. Lucians at the most difficult time in our history. But I agree, we are resilient people. We will overcome and we will rise to claim our rightful place in the constellation of stars, because we'll be led by the star. So, Mr. Speaker, what should we look forward to under St. Lucia Labour Party? And I wish tonight, Mr. Speaker, would be the night when we could present to the people of St. Lucia our plans for St. Lucia. And like the Americans are saying now, we will build back better. We can build back better under the St. Lucia Labour Party, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, it is rather shameful when you see some people, they disdain for ordinary people. They dislike for ordinary people. And what hurts me most is when I see some members opposite that ought to know better, that's supposed to know better. They're really not of that stock. And they are all just falling in line because it's the convenient thing to do. How can you just repeatedly allow somebody to disrespect your people, people you are connected with? Why are you doing it, Mr. Speaker? But that's their burden to carry, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to share a few thoughts with you, Mr. Speaker, on creative industries, on tourism and investment, and I hope I have enough time. How much time do I have left, Mr. Speaker? Another hour?
15 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, there's so much talk about creative industries today that we often get confused about what it is and what it is not. It is also becoming fashionable to speak of creative industries as a catch-all and simply speak of it in its business manifestation. And now popularly people refer to it as the orange economy. I recall my younger days as a student researcher at the Folk Research Center and be part of the oral history project of St. Lucia. I recall the vibrant discussions going on then with cultural thinkers like Parber, Booth, Straw, Burt, Didicus, and Papu, and many others. And I got to understand that creative industries is about the generation or the exploitation of knowledge and information. But it is also about the cultural industries. And even some purists do not want it to be thought of as an industry. That there are specific activities that focus on our definition of self and expression of our identity. So the cultural industry must be seen as the core of the creative industry and must not be seen only in its profit-driven sense, but as a vital tool to promote social integration, social values, cultural promotion, and as a source of information as well as knowledge. So you can understand why, Mr. Speaker, that Soleil Festival, Soleil whatever it was, would have been a failure. And the boast that Carnival only became alive under this government is as barren as a mule is. Creative industries cannot be reduced to simply a playlist. This is political gimmick and a PR stunt. Before we even start boasting of creative industries in St. Lucia, we must also start the national dialogue about how government is organized, how we educate our people, how citizens relate to communities and governments, and how we secure human rights and dignity. There can be no creativity if there is no dignity among our people. But there is so much in our cultural bank that we can propel onto the world stage, announcing our unique and differentiated posture in the homogenized setting that is globalization. The cultural and creative industries will once again become a priority for the St. Lucia Labour Party. The Labour Party inherited a country in 1997 where the economy and society had been traumatized by the rapid, though not unexpected, decline in the banana industry. We had to set a new course, establish a new beginning, and look to a more prosperous future. It was decided then, under the leadership of Kenny Anthony, that we should move to a more service-oriented economy. It meant greater emphasis on tourism and hospitality, linking back to agriculture. We always fought from 1997 that it had to evolve into a people's industry, not based on servitude, but on service. We would be exporting our cultural spirit, our charm, and our national resources of scenery and beaches. It is why we introduced the nature heritage tourism and developed so many sites as major tourism products. It is why, with Cricket World Cup in 2007, we encouraged St. Lucians to add rooms and apartments to their homes. We said, don't do it for the sake of Cricket World Cup, but do it if you have a view to own a stake in the future of tourism in St. Lucia. That was before Airbnb. It is why, under the member for Castries East, we had the most hotel rooms ever added in St. Lucia and the most flights introduced. But times have changed. In recent years, there have been increasing public discontent expressed that tourism has been implemented in St. Lucia. Particularly in the last 4 years under the United Workers' Party, there has been an escalating public outcry on the policies of the government. These concerns are focused on, one, the disdain of the government for a sustainable approach based on respect for the environment and conservation of natural resources, the Dolphin Park, DSH, Carbot, the use of Queen's Chain by properties to the exclusion of St. Lucians, foreign ownership of the tourism infrastructure, as the focus is more on resort hotels, which are mainly foreign-owned, the use of local financing for foreigners investing in our tourism infrastructure, not enough linkages with local agricultural and manufacturing sector, not enough local involvement and benefit from the tourism industry. So we need a new tourism model to achieve a people's tourism, putting St. Lucians first, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we also need a new approach to investment. Carbot and DSH have desecrated our national pride and our sensibilities as a people. DSH should never have happened. Never have happened. The SLP position has been and will remain that the framework agreement and subsequent agreements should never have been signed in their present form. And we will review them when we get into government. Never must a foreign investor be made to be more important than the health and welfare of our people. We must never have horses before hospital. We must never use COVID income support funds from the IMF to be used to pay for a road for DSH. Carbot financing, the financing of the Carbot lands is really, really sad, Mr. Speaker. A real callot to the people of St. Lucia. The more you learn of the Carbot arrangement, the more heinous it is. I want St. Lucians to understand what happened with Carbot. Just give me a couple of minutes, Mr. Speaker. There it is that the NIC is looking for properties to invest in. The investment committee of the NIC identifies the Carbot lands as a prime investment. They get a valuation to be done of it. The valuation is slightly over $90 million. They intend to buy it. However, there's an agreement between the bank and an interested party who for more than 3 years could not raise the capital to pay for it. rather than NIC being encouraged to probably wait out and then purchase it, they are instead told, do not buy it. Give the money to the interested party that cannot raise the money to buy it. You need to think about that. This is our NIC with our pension funds who could have bought the property, and immediately our asset base would have increased by about $60 million because it is valued $37 million. The cost of it is about $47 million. It's valued over $90 million. So just by NIC buying it, its asset base value has increased. They are told, do not buy it. Give the people who cannot raise the money to buy it. And then those people, the investor, who's a foreign investor, then cuts it up and starts to sell lots. And based on the information on the website, when you do the calculation, they would have made over $150 million already in sales. We didn't get a chance at St. Lucian's. Nobody put a consortium together to buy it. Nobody told NIC, make sure you buy it and save it for St. Lucian's. They allowed a foreigner. They gave the foreigner the money to buy it, who then makes a profit from it. And I heard the Prime Minister, my own ears, say on Blazing that the Labour Party, Philippe, is making a big noise about how expensive they're selling the land. The only reason why they could sell it so expensive is because the investor had the money to develop it and the plans. And where would NIC get the money from? But the only reason why the investor now has money to develop the lands is because he got a loan from us to buy it and to sell it and to have money in his hand. But think about that. He did not have, how can somebody that did not have $40 million to buy the land in the first place now have $200 million to develop it? If he did not have to acquire the land to either use as security or to sell parts of it.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order, the member is making a lot of statements there that cannot be substantiated, calling into question the integrity of the board of NIC in making decisions, and in the process calling into question the integrity of a developer and investor in this country. If the member cannot present factual information to back up what he's saying, he should withdraw these statements. Or if he's a member of the board of NIC and he knows that, then let him declare he's taking it. But to call the National Insurance Corporation Investment Committee into question and their decision making without any evidence to back it up, Mr. Speaker, is grossly misleading.
You have 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I did not just stay and say that. There was a press conference with the director, Mr. Maffrey of the NIC, and the chairman, Mr. Isaac. Mr. Isaac said that the issue of carbon, I can't give you his direct words, that investment opportunity was introduced to him by the Minister of Finance. The chairman of NIC said that. Mr. Maffrey said they had an interest in buying the lands. The investment committee went to see the land. They said this is a nice piece of land, we should buy it. They got a valuation done to buy it. I didn't just say that, Mr. Speaker. There was a press conference. These are quoted words, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you know, can I move on, please? Because I think my time is running out. You might stop me anytime. How many more minutes do I have?
You're the one that went back to the point.
I beg your pardon?
You're the one that went back to the point.
Oh, okay. So, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. So, Mr. Speaker, let me move quickly. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to say a few things on Ojo Labs, Mr. Speaker. You see, Mr. Speaker, it's the same thing about Ojo Labs. Now, I think the member for Denwin North said it, Mr. Speaker. Let me tell you, we would love there to be more, you know, call centers in St. Lucia. Why not, Mr. Speaker? It's a very good way of creating employment, Mr. Speaker. But why couldn't this working government put together a package for St. Lucians with all what they gave Ojo Labs and say to St. Lucians, here's an opportunity to invest. We will give you all those things. So you can then do it. Because, Mr. Speaker, they had St. Lucians before we started call centers. Yes, they had, Mr. Speaker. Why should we fix up a factory shelf for somebody, pay their recurrent expenditure, help pay salaries? Why can't we do it for St. Lucia? You mean there are no entrepreneurs in St. Lucia? There are no businessmen in St. Lucia that can take this opportunity? Why are we doing it for foreigners, Mr. Speaker? So our investment, Mr. Speaker, policy will put local St. Lucian investment first, Mr. Speaker. We will be guided by the principle of empowering local industries and empowering our people, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, we are approaching a defining moment in our history. Twice before, Mr. Speaker, since independence, a government decided to remain in power for more than 5 years after being elected. Twice. In 1979, the United Workers' Party called elections on July the 2nd. The last elections was held on May 7th, 1974. 5 years, 2 months later, they lost 12-5. In 1997, the United Workers' Party again called elections on May 23rd, 1997. The last elections were held on April 27th, 1992. 5 years, 1 month later.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order.
Yes?
I've resisted from standing up on 2 occasions when members on the other side have tried to suggest that the election date is due on June 6th. If you look at your Constitution, Section 54 and 55, the Constitution is very clear, Mr. and Mrs. Speaker. Elections are due 5 years of Parliament, which would mean, Mr. Speaker, that elections are actually due on July 12th of 2021, and that would be the 5 years. So again, Mr. Speaker, the 5-year term is the 5 years of Parliament. It's not the 5 years from when the elections are. And what is very sad, Mr. Speaker, is members on the other side who know better and who've been there for so many terms ought to know that. And I would suggest that we, as parliamentarians, Mr. Speaker, we ourselves should not be misleading the people of St. Lucia. But that is the style of members on the other side, but I would like to be corrected, Mr. Speaker.
You see, that's precisely the point I was making. The point I was making is, and if the Prime Minister could just reason, in a humble way, if he can just reason in a humble way, you will understand the point I was making. Why is it that so many governments never stay in power for more than 5 years after elections? Because there's a convention, there's an understanding that if you have an election, you call the next election within 5 years of that election. It's a convention.
Again, Mr. Speaker, conventions only apply.
But Mr. Speaker, there's a point of order. No. On what? Can I proceed? So my point is.
Honorable.
So I was making a point.
Let's cool it down. Mr. Prime Minister, you stood on a point of order?
Yes, sir.
Let me hear
Mr.
it.
Speaker, convention applies when we don't have anything written in law.
What's the point of order?
We actually have a constitution, Mr. Speaker, which is very clear. Elections are due 5 years from the date of the first Parliament. If members want to make any other suggestions, that's fine, but please do not suggest to the general public in any way that elections are exceeding July 12th or June 6th has anything to relate. The date of the election has nothing to do with it. It is written in the Constitution. There's nothing conventional about that.
Can I proceed, Mr. Speaker? I mean, my time is...
Continue.
Are you going to give me back my time, Mr. Speaker?
Start.
So, we don't have a fixed date for elections. This is erroneous. There is nothing in the Constitution that says elections must be 5 years after the first sitting of Parliament. We don't have a fixed date. So, Mr. Speaker, the point I was making, Mr. Speaker, is that the Constitution says...
Honorable members.
Mr. Speaker,
Just now, Mr. Prime Minister, every member, upon taking the oath in this House, is given a copy of the Constitution. Every member is given a copy of the Constitution. So I don't understand the back and forth on that point. The Constitution is clear. I've read it and read it. The House will be dissolved, if not dissolved before that, on July 12th.
Exactly. So I was making the point, Mr. Speaker. I am moving on, Mr. Speaker, that twice in our history since independence, twice in our history, a government decided to go more than 5 years since elections, 79 and 97, both times by the United Workers' Party, and both times they lost, Mr. Speaker. So I thought I should give the Prime Minister this historical lesson, Mr. Speaker.
On a point
Honorable member.
On a point of order,
yes.
Mr. Speaker, the member again is misleading the House. The elections of 2006 went past the anniversary date of the elections, because elections prior to that in 2001 was not on the 11th of December. And the member was chairman of World Cup, and he knew the commitment that was given to World Cup.
What's that? Hold on. This is erroneous.
You went past the date of elections in 2006, went past the anniversary date. So for the member to stand up and say only twice it has happened is erroneous, and he again, as usual, is misleading the House with false information.
Honorable members, we've turned... Honorable members.
Yeah, in fact, you're reinforcing my point.
Honorable
members. So you better learn your lesson. Sorry.
Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Member for Castro South, and here's the ruling on this point. We are now making the appropriation bill an elections bill. What are we doing here? Move on from this.
So, Mr. Speaker, the people of St. Lucia were promised a better St. Lucia, but they've gotten a bitter St. Lucia. A tale of two St. Lucias, where a few can smile and be merry on the back of a diminishing middle class and a declining working class. This government does not care about you, the people of St. Lucia. This is not even about the mistakes a government makes, about delays in projects, or a misconceived program. This is about the fundamental principle of governing. Under this government, the people, St. Lucians, are pushed to the back burner, and our limited resources are being shared to the FFF. I was pained to hear the member opposite state that the lands which were given to DSH were just empty lands with cows on them. And then the Cabot lands were just empty lands with nothing on them. This budget does nothing to change that characteristic of this government. It is still a government for the FFF. This budget statement must be rejected. The people are fed up, and the people will demonstrate that they have no choice, and to emphatically show that Shasni must go. I thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.